Welcome to episode 33 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this special edition, we look back at #Sports Conference and have a replay of my Q&A panel on sports gaming and sports data. You're listening to the Sports Geek podcast.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, this is a very special edition of the Sports Geek podcast. I'm bringing this out today because earlier today, I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to join in with the #Sports Conference that was run on Google Plus and via Google Hangouts. I was very lucky, and thanks to Steve and Anthony from #Sports for inviting me to moderate the Sports Gaming and Sports Data Conference. So what I'm going to do here is have a replay of the chat that I had with the guys, but also you can find all the links in the show notes for the conference itself and the replay if you really want to watch the video version. It was fun, again, to do another Google Hangout. And also what you can do is, what I really want you to do is to connect with all the panelists that were on my panel. So a big shout out and a big thank you to those guys, Bo Moon from Bloomberg Sports, Dave Abbott from Sports Data, Bob Morgan from SportsStream and now Facebook, and Ben Davis from Fizzle on the Sports Data panel. And on the Sports Gaming panel, Tom Griffiths from FanDuel, Steve Berman from Overdog, and Carlos Diaz from Quarta. All the links to connect with them on Twitter and LinkedIn and their websites are in the show notes. That'll be sportsgeekhq.com/33. Let's get into the session. Hello and welcome everybody to SportsConf. This live hangout is actually coming to you from Australia. My name is Sean Callanan from sportsgeekhq.com. I've got a couple of great panels. We've got 2 panels of 30 minutes, so it's going to be really quick, fast-paced. Make sure you send in any questions you've got. We've got a sports data panel, or sports data, as we would say here in Australia, panel up first, and then in the second half an hour, we've got a sports gaming. So those 2 hashtags are sports data and sports gaming. I'm going to introduce these panels because, like I said, we've only got half an hour for each panel. And if you've got any questions, come along. My first guest is Dave. I'm going to get the guys to introduce themselves and tell you what they do. But our first panel is a data panel. First, I've got Dave Abbott from Sports Data. G'day, Dave, and welcome to SportsConf. You want to tell us a little bit about what you do and what Sports Data does?
Sure can. So, hey, I'm Dave Abbott. I'm the co-founder of a company called Sports Data, and I think the name pretty much says it all. We have sports data. As of a few weeks ago, we were acquired by a company called Sport Radar, which now gives us a great coverage of sports all around the world. We offer real-time scores, stats, play-by-play details, schedules, fixtures, and other info for about 40 sports across about now 800 leagues. And I think we cover about 200,000 or more events annually. What makes us different? Quality, immediacy of our data. We're easy to integrate, great support, price, and we give free samples. And the feedback from our customers has been very flattering in this first couple of years.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. Well, that leads on to our next guest, and I think he actually is a partner and client of yours, Dave. Bo Moon from Bloomberg Sports, who's coming to us live from Dodger Stadium. So this is a truly international conference. Welcome, Bo. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you, Sean. As you introduced me, my name is Bo Moon, co-founder and EVP at Bloomberg Sports. We actually consume sports data and other data sets, and we take that data and turn it into other services and products for both professional teams and for consumers, whether it is a fantasy product or a visualization of data on air. So that's really where we come to play with that data.
So that's one side of the data equation, or the data equation. I'm going to keep correcting myself because that's how we say data in Australia. So that's the stats and the analytics behind the scenes that Dave and Bowen presenting those fantasy stats. The other side of data is the fan data and collecting of data. And so I want to introduce Bob Morgan, formerly of SportsStream and now at Facebook. So he's got his hands on a lot of data. Bob, you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what you're now doing at Facebook?
Sure. I was the co-founder and CEO, as you mentioned, at SportsStream, and it's a very new thing to be here at Facebook. So I'll largely talk about what we're doing at SportsStream, and then I can touch on some of the themes here. At SportsStream, we built a platform that was really focused on surfacing great content in real time around sports. So looking at social posts or stats or scores as they happen in the moment to create fan experiences around that. So we built our own data model that understands every league, sport, team, player, exec, media member in a big structured data set. And then we use that platform to do a couple of things. One is to filter content, and then we would make that available to team and media partners. The other piece of that is we started to use that structured data set to look at analytics in real time. And that kind of leads me to the Facebook part. We were taking an API from Facebook where we could look at the aggregate mentions across Facebook for a particular game, a particular team, a particular player in real time. And it's a very powerful signal to help indicate what is the broader audience talking about it at any given time. I'm sure we can get into that a little bit more detail. But that's SportsStream and now Facebook.
Thanks, Bob. And our last but not least guest, Ben Davis from Fizzle. Can you give us a little bit of background of where Fizzle play in the whole data space? Unmute yourself, Ben. That's good.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you for the intro, Sean. So yeah, Fizzle is we're an enterprise software company that has developed a pretty robust fan engagement platform. Our platform is able to manage and aggregate data from both public and private sources. We're able to make sense of the fan data by automating the convergence of fan profiles inside of our data warehouse. What sits on top of this foundation are multiple digital marketing channels such as email and SMS, social media, broadcasting solutions. So it's really a very encompassing ecosystem in terms of how a fan would engage with a particular team or a brand.
Well, thank you very much. First thing I wanted to get started with was, I guess, the changing appetite of fans for data. And I guess this is a question really for Dave and Bo. That's your space. We've seen popularity of sabermetrics, and there's been movies. Obviously, Moneyball is making stats more popular. And in the next panel, we're going to be talking about gaming and how big fantasy sports is. Just from the content and the amount of data you have to present to fans, how much is that growing? And do you think, where do you think that's headed as far as delivering stats to fans and what partners, in your case, Dave, are wanting from a stats point of view?
Well, I mean, certainly, yeah. Fans really are asking for more, and they look at sabermetrics and you see how much depth people really want to go into, and you say, all right, well, you look at the social, you look at all the pictures that are coming in and all the other stuff that's coming in, and it's like, all right, how do we take this crowd that is really snacking on information, and then how do you really expose them and get them down into the depth of information that you want to get to them? And as you look at things like infographics, as you look at like these little snackable pieces of information that come across, those are the things that you can grab that short attention span guy with and really drive him down in there. And as you look at the stats that we're all used to looking at, I mean, that's all fine and dandy. But I think as the technology is getting deeper and there's more and more different stats being displayed that take that sabermetrics down to a whole new level. At a very mechanical, technological level, I think it just surfaces a whole new generation, or a whole new generation of stats, really.
And what about yourself? What about yourself, Bo? Dave just mentioned then the rise of the infographics. I don't see my feed every day. It's got a new type of infographic in it. Are you seeing that the fans are calling out for more content like that?
Well, it's really simple. 10 years ago, the only baseball stat you really saw for a pitcher was ERA. And nobody knew what WHIP was. And more, I'm seeing the stat WHIP, and that's actually a much more sabermetric stat, but everyone knows now it better describes a baseball player. So yes, there's absolutely a move more towards stats. But what we see in our business is that's even growing in a much larger way. We work with broadcasters, and they're used to getting the basic stats, the play-by-play. But what they ask from us now is much more compelling, interesting information. Like, what do the stats say about whether a football team should go for 1 point or 2 points on a conversion? And that it's the debate that everyone has, at the bar or with their friends in the living room. But now the consumers are demanding the numbers. And one thing that we provide to the broadcasters is, what the book says. The book says that they should go for it. And that's because the fans have a hunch. The numbers can help to defend that. And we provide a lot of that kind of advanced information to them. And really, it's because the broadcasters have understood that that's what they want. And so the broadcasters are asking us to provide that to them. And that's definitely the case for fantasy as well, as you guys can imagine. People want more data. They actually watch more TV because they're looking at their fantasy team as they perform in real time. And so that kind of data and that kind of information is also critically tied to the success and growth of broadcast as well.
I think that actually leads on really well to both Bob and Ben, in that we are getting this new type of fan now that does want to, does have that second screen, and I'm sure second screen has been spoken about today, but they are consuming their sports via these visualizations. We've seen it with different sports. You can bring up, the MLB and see the strike zone, all of those kind of things. So, Bob, for the stuff that you did with SportsStream and this insatiable appetite that sports fans are now having for data and content, what's your take on it?
Sure. Well, when you talk about the second screen, one of the most important things there is that I think you have to work out solutions that are synchronous, things that are happening in real time along with the action, and you really want to get that latency down low. But what's working against you in some cases is the volume of the data and the content. Try to make determinations about what is of high quality and what's interesting. So there's all these terrific things that Bo and Dave's companies can deliver you from a statistical point of view. There's also massive amounts of conversation going on Twitter and Facebook, photos coming in from Instagram. And so how do you reconcile all those things and give a second screen or additive information to what you're trying to do while you're watching the game, and that you're not struggling and jumping around at a bunch of different things. So from our point of view, the way we tackled that was to take that structured data model that I described before, learn a bit about the user. So whether that's through a Facebook Connect and what type of teams do you like, what are your friends talking about, and basically is a big filtering exercise to try to find what is the most relevant, highest quality piece of information and that we can present to somebody at any given moment, and then build a stream of those pieces of information in a synchronous way. And I think that those problems are only going to grow in terms of the amount of information available, the amount of conversation, the amount of potential distraction from what we're all trying to do is enjoy the sports that we love. It's so much of a good thing. So we're trying to find these solutions, get you the best content that we can as fast as we can.
And Ben, what's your take on that as far as, you've got all these consumers wanting more data, wanting to get closer to the action. How are they consuming that, and what kind of info are you sort of pulling out of that space?
Yeah, Sean, from our perspective, it's really important to be able to facilitate for teams a true 360-degree view of the fan, because the reality is that fans engage with their teams, with their favorite brands differently through the different channels. And so I think what most teams have been challenged with is how to make sense of the collective of that data. How one sports fan engages, with Twitter versus Facebook is different. And, to be able to have insight across all those channels can really help a team better engage with that fan at any point of time within any context. And so traditionally, all of this data, from an engagement perspective, has resided in silos of applications. And what we're really have aimed to do is to converge all of that data into one area where the team can actually run predictive analytics, they can run behavioral analysis, and they can engage with the fan differently on Monday versus Tuesday, depending on what has happened in the sports world, but even beyond what's happened, in that particular fan's life. And that really enables a team to establish a much closer relationship with each individual fan.
So that's the other thing is that the data play is, especially for sports teams, is that they want to get close, to get more information on their fans and better serve their fans with the right offers. So teams are now using tools. They're using smart tickets. They're using their phones. They're aggregating data off activity off social media. I'll start at the other end of the panel. I'll start again with you, Ben. What are the best places for sports teams to be getting this kind of data from their fans?
Well, again, Sean, it's you've got to look at everything in aggregate, because if you just concentrate on one channel, then your insight to that fan is going to be very narrow, and you can't necessarily learn everything that there is to know about fans through that one channel. If John Smith only engages, with the Golden State Warriors through Twitter, then fine. That's the only place where you can capture information. But if John Smith is engaging through Facebook, Twitter, email, Ticketmaster, they're buying products through GoldenStateWarriors.com, then you've got to look at everything, because just because John Smith is in one particular profile, in this year, when John Smith, maybe the next year he graduates from high school or college, he goes out, he gets a new job, and he has a completely different perspective on the team, on life, or whatever it may be. So you have to be able to have that 360-degree view of the fan, because John is going to engage differently, through all of those channels. So, from our perspective, if you're only looking at one channel, you're not getting the entire picture.
And Bob, from your perspective with SportsStream and obviously using things like Facebook Connect and things like that, what's your experience been in the reticence? I mean, if we go back a couple of years, there would have been fans who would have really railed against, I'm going to share my data. Has that lessened? Has things like Facebook Connect and making it completely seamless, are fans willing to give up that data for a little bit of a reward?
Well, given it's our first week here, I'll probably speak most to the SportsStream perspective. But I think in large part, what I'm excited to see is a lot of the teams, they've done a lot of work, I think great work in being content creators. And now you see more and more where there's a really great value exchange, where that's great. You want to be close to the team. You really want to see the behind the scenes look. But, and I think Ben was talking around some of these themes where, as fans are connecting, getting closer to the teams, they're reciprocating and adding value. It's not just a marketing campaign. It's, what benefits can we give you here at the park? What sorts of insights about the team can we give? That I think, the idea that fans are feeling more and more comfortable to connect is, it's that there's a good trust with the team, that there's a good value exchange there in terms of the information that's being exchanged between them. I mean, for us, largely what we're trying to do is create personalized content experiences. So, again, if you connect, we can tell which teams you like and really give you that 360-degree content view. There are a lot of teams that started to tap into and sort of, when you connect and you come to an experience that we're powering for them, we're giving you all those different types of information and data as the game's in progress. That's a really great value for the fan to connect and unlock. Here's a lot of information about what's going on, especially while the game's in progress.
One for Dave and Bo, as one of the big frustrations as a digital marketer and for fans overall is going to stadiums and not having the connectivity and not being able to share and be part of that experience. Stadiums are now becoming smarter. not only for the fan and the fan experience, but we're also seeing a lot of data captured, both from the sports, like on the field. If you're looking at the guys at SportsView and the NBA tracking the player movement, but then also on the concourses where we've got the low energy Bluetooth tracking fans through the mobile app. How are you handling that data growth in sports, especially around the stadiums?
Well, I know from our perspective, I'm actually here at Dodger Stadium, so I want to give a shout out to Dodger fans. But we're here to talk about what we do to help the team with data improve. But we're also here to talk about how that can extend to other things like the fan experience. Now, I think, in my personal opinion, it's all about engagement with this new data. Now, if it's fan data or if it's performance data of the team, it's all about engagement still. What you're trying to do is get the fan to engage with more social media so that they can feel like they're part of the conversation. And you were never able to really talk with teams and athletes like you are now with social media. From a data perspective, it's about, like I said, it's like letting the data play into your daily conversation. We're at the game. Hey, do you think he's going to strike out? No way, man. That's Big Poppy. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's Big Poppy. He's either going to hit a home run or he's going to hit a strikeout.
You are at Dodger Stadium, remember?
Yeah, we're trying to bring meaning and substantiate that conversation, because ultimately, that's again, it's more engaging to the fan. And we just did at CES this last week. We did a release with LG on a smart TV where we're bringing some of that predictive data, and that's really my last point, which is people have a hunch, they have a prediction about what's going to happen. Data can start to lead people down the path of really substantiating that hunch. And I think that's also engaging. Oh, look, the data points to my prediction. And I was right, they are going to win. Or I was right, he is going to strike out. So I think it's all about fan engagement, whether it's social or advanced data, and we're here to kind of empower that.
And what about yourself, Dave? The amount of data that you've been collecting over the last 3-5 years would have been growing each year on year?
It certainly has been growing, and everything we just described here, especially as we talk about the on-venue experience, that's more and more challenging, right? To really be able to sit there, capture the data as it's happening, and then enhance the fan experience. So whether you're sitting there with some sort of a second screen at the event, we see that at venues all the time now, whether it's something like glass or whatever, where now you really, truly are looking at the field and getting data at the same time. It's hard. I'm not going to lie to you. And as the technology gets better, and you see this stuff, whether it's SportsView or some of the stuff that some of these other companies are doing, where you really can transfer that data at the speed of light, right from the broadcast, right out to the devices. That's obviously the Uber experience. And as fans, it's so cool. And our experiences are only going to get better.
So what I want to do is ask you all, and you were just talking again, Bo, about about latest trade shows and the latest things coming. What excites you the most about the era of sports data? You don't have to crystal ball or anything, but what developments in the space are exciting you most about what we're going with? What's available now to people who are investigating data? I'll start with you, Dave, as someone who's at the source, the coalface, if you will.
Sure. Well, let's use the baseball example, since Bo's sitting there at the stadium. Being able to tell how a shortstop responds to a ground ball to his right as versus his left, when he's 24 as versus 34. Now, we're all sitting at home. We're all as smart as Bill James. We're all as smart as that general manager, right? Because now we can start saying, well, this player, when he's 36, he's not worth as much when he's 38. Of course, we've got player union issues, as I say this so cavalier. But the thing is that takes our interest as a fan. We all want to be smart, right? We all want to really be as smart as that guy in the dugout. Now, all of a sudden, we can. Or at least we can talk like we are. And I think everybody wins in that conversation. Obviously, changes all the economics, but that level of data, whether it's baseball, taking that sabermetrics and applying it to the NHL, right? What's that? We look at time on ice today. Well, okay, how fast does he get across the blue line? I think that's going to be the big change.
And what about yourself, Bob?
I think personalized experiences, where we're going with creating something that really, really means something to each individual fan is really exciting. So whether that's, starting with things I mentioned before around following the teams you care, that's pretty straightforward. But now we have these opportunities where with this wealth of information and things like red zone channels and what your friends are doing and talking about games, if you can create something that's very cohesive for each individual fan around, these are all the sports events that are going on right now that you care about. Here are what your friends are interested in doing and talking about, which games they're going to. Do you want to go with them? Do you want to chat with them right now while they're watching it? Here's information that may be coming from Bo and Dave's platforms that's very interesting for you right now. All that sort of thing. And underneath all that, obviously, is a need for a really robust data set to provide context. So you need to know what games are going on, what teams somebody cares about, who their friends are, and reconcile all those things. But I think the opportunity is there for each sports fan to have just an amazing personalized experience and something I'm really excited about.
And yourself, Ben, potentially maybe take the sports team's point of view. What should sports teams be excited about that the sports data space can offer?
Well, being able to process and make sense of the incredible large sets of data that they capture, and then being able to automate actionable activity for each fan in the right context at the right time. If you think about just us as human beings, what do we love? We love being around people that make us laugh, people that we enjoy being around, and people that care about us. And so there's really no difference between trying to establish the same type of relationship between a fan and their favorite team or their favorite broadcaster. It's fun experiences, but then also kind of giving back to the fan to show them that, we're the Golden State Warriors, but we still care about you and we care about what's going on in your life. And being able to automate that activity is, I think, is groundbreaking.
Yep. Well, the thing is, and I really want to congratulate everyone. We got through a panel about big data without anyone doing the big data joke. So I'll do it because it has to be done. Big data is like teenage sex. Everyone says they're doing it, but no one knows how to do it at all. So that's one way to wrap up our data panel. I want to thank you guys for coming on the panel. I'd love to have this has been a really short time frame, so I'd love to have you guys on my podcast, Sports Geek Podcast, sometime to have a chat a bit further about what you guys do. So thank you very much to Dave Abbott from Sports Data. That was my shout out for a goodbye.
Oh,
I'm not getting there.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Bob from SportsStream and now at Facebook.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Bo Moon, and say good day to the Dodgers for me.
I will do. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ben from Fizzle, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sean. Take care.
Well, that was our sports data panel. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. You can see the Sports Geek Twitter handle there on my screen. I'm also at Sean Callanan. I've seen a few tweets. I've been taking a peek and keeping the questions coming in. Our next panel is on sports gaming. So we're swapping over the hashtag now over to the hashtag sports gaming. I've got three guys coming on from varied experience and varied backgrounds, so it'll be a pretty wide-ranging chat. So we want to talk about how the gaming market is affected by sports and how sports is affected by gaming. So I'll introduce our first guest. It's Tom Griffiths from FanDuel. Tom, are you there? And welcome to the sports gaming panel. And you've taken off mute, so I won't have to stretch any longer. Welcome.
G'day, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to give us a little bit of background of yourself and what FanDuel does?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of the founders of FanDuel. We started the site back in 2009. What we do is fantasy sports with a twist. So rather than playing for an entire season, you just play for a single day. So that means that you pick players from a single day's games, say one football Sunday, enter it into any of our thousands of different types of leagues. So you've got head-to-head 2-player leagues, 5-player leagues, 10-player leagues, anything up to thousands of players competing with each other. And where it really gets interesting for users is that you can play for money legally in the US. So I can play for anything from $1 all the way up to $500 and win $2 or several $1,000s, depending on how well I do and what contests I enter. So to give you a sense of how we're growing, we usually measure it out in terms of payouts. So in 2009, when we launched, we paid out $100,000 in winnings. And last year, we just closed the books on 2013. We paid out $150 million worth of payouts, winnings for users. So the industry is really growing, and we think it's a really exciting time to be part of fantasy sports.
Thank you very much, Tom. My next guest is Steve Berman, also at Steve Berman on Twitter and from The Real Overdog. Steve, do you want to tell us a little bit about what the Overdog does, and how it can engage fans?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Glad to be here. Overdog is building a connection between the world of sports and console gaming. What that means is we have proprietary licenses with all of the major sports unions, the NFLPA, the MLBPA, and on. And we work with athletes to connect them with their fans via consoles. Athletes are young, engaging, tired guys at the end of the day. 75% of the NFL self-identifies as an avid gamer. They sit at home and they play Madden for 2 hours at night. What we do is we take that 2 hours of anonymous gaming experience, we put their name behind it, we put a brand behind it for them, and we help connect them to their fans so that we work within their sports habits.
Thank you very much. And my last guest is Carlos Diaz from Quada. I hope I am saying that right. I think I am. Carlos, you want to tell us a little bit about Quada and how it fits into the sports gaming space?
Yes, of course. My name is Carlos Diaz. So I'm the CEO and the founder of Quada. So basically, Quada is a highly scalable live mobile gaming platform for broadcasters, advertisers, and producers. So our customers are global TV players who are willing to increase the level of engagement with viewers and propose TV viewers to really participate live during the broadcast. So obviously we've been doing a lot of work in the sports area. So we've been working with Turner Sports, for example, around MLB. And we've got also clients like big advertisers like Bud Light and Budweiser that use our platform to create a live mobile social game around the NFL with an application named FanDuel that you can download on the App Store, and that allows you to interact with any NFL games on TV. We do the Super Bowl, this year, of course, with Bud Light. And it's a predictive game. So basically it's prediction, question, trivia, polls, whatever you want, that allows, the viewers to not only watch, the game on TV, but really get a sense to participate with the game and play with their friends.
Okay, so let's getting stuck into the gaming space. I want to start with Tom, because fantasy pretty much has been it was the original social network. It was the way that sports fans interacted for many a year. Like, we've all played in roto leagues and fantasy comps with our friends over the time. Digital has obviously helped that and enabled fans to be connected around the world. So now you can obviously play leagues around the world. And social has been a really big another jump, because now you can trash talk your friends in a public sphere, and you don't have to just text them. You get to tell everybody that you beat someone in a league. So just give us a little bit of background of how digital and then social has really made fantasy one of the biggest things in sports.
Absolutely. It's a great question. I mean, digital really was the making of fantasy sports. It was a fairly niche activity since it started in the 1960s until the advent of the internet in the mid to late 90s, when sites like Yahoo, Commissioner.com, Sportsline allowed you to play these games with an automated scoring backend, so that you didn't have to do all of the manual calculations of yards and points and touchdowns and so on. So that's when it really became popular. And I think what we're seeing now is maybe the third age of fantasy online. So it went from the analog to the digital in the 90s, and now in the late noughties and kind of early in this decade, you get to not only play online, but also, as you say, kind of engage socially and engage on the mobile devices. So we've seen a huge trend in our usage patterns onto mobile, as have the bigger operators. So now we're at a point where over half of our traffic is on mobile. So you see that because people want to check their scores when they're watching the game at the bar or in the stadium, but people want to swap out players and so on. And I think kind of on the social side, not only, to your point, people are trash talking their friends and league buddies, they're also trash talking the athletes as well. So I don't know if you guys saw this news story back in September where Ray Rice came out on Twitter to say, he's not a fan of fantasy football anymore because given that he'd had a bad game, he'd had a torrent of abuse from fantasy players saying, I can't believe I picked you. You let me down. So there's kind of engagement with the athletes that you've selected for your leagues as well. So it's a big change the last few years.
Yeah, that does have its upside and its downside. I mean, we help with teams and athletes, and yeah, fantasy has amped everything up. But yeah, unfortunately, sometimes that's the ugly side of social too, when fans just feel like they have the right to berate someone because he dropped a touchdown catch, or he didn't make 100 runs, or he missed a free throw. Right. So as an athlete on social media, it's something that they have to be very, very aware of. You were talking there about mobile, and I wanted to sort of jump to Carlos because your apps are in the mobile space. Right. The growth of mobile and the fact that it is becoming the go-to device. We're going to have a whole generation of kids that are going to say we're the tablet first and phone first, and they won't even know what a desktop is. As the society becomes more mobile, will gaming become more mobile? Like, will that just become the go-to platform?
Yes, in fact, if you look a little bit at the figures, right now, the amount of time spent on mobile devices is going through the roof. From 2009 to 2013, the spend time on mobile increased by 500%. So everything is mobile. So there is still people, watching TV, obviously, even if the numbers are decreasing a little bit, but it's 38% of our time we spend this time watching TV. But 20% of our time we spend our time on mobile, and it's increasing. It's the only media that is right now increasing. So what is very interesting, if you look at the rise of mobile and compare that with TV, that it's not only increasing, but it's also affecting the way we're watching TV. So 24% of viewer attention is focusing on mobile during the TV programming. So it means that we're not only watching TV or we're not only on mobile, we're doing both at the same time. And there is a stat from Nielsen that is very interesting that say that 47% of mobile device users use their device to engage in TV-related activities daily. So it's a real new behavior, that what we call the second screen. I hate this word because I think that it's for young generation, this is not a second screen. This is really the first screen. And the reality that that's very true with sports. Basically, you're watching a game on TV and you've got your iPad or your tablet or your smartphone with you, and you're doing both activities at the same time. So if you look a little bit of what people are doing with this new screen, while they're watching something on TV. So the first thing they're doing is searching for more information, news, exclusives, and data. They're trying also to connect with other viewers and maybe trash talk about what's going on TV right now. That's what's going on, for example, on Twitter. But the other thing they're doing is really to try to play and interact with the game itself. They're watching on TV, and that's a very interesting trend we are focusing on at Quarter. Is really how can we make the viewers. How can we turn, the viewers into active participants, And I think that if you look at the numbers and the level of engagement we have with our application, I mean, it's a very high level of engagement. People really want that. They really want to participate in what they're watching, play along, the game they're watching on TV, and play with their friends. I think it's really a social game, what they're looking for.
One thing that's really, really important, especially if you're in the mobile space and you want to dive into whether it's the mobile gaming space or even just the mobile space, and you are trying to engage that second screen. One of the large banks over here in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank, they shared some of the stats of the usage of their app, and it was they would show the spikes during an ad break, whether you're watching Dexter or whether you're watching the football. They could see that the app usage would go up during a timeout or during an ad break. And so when you're building an app, it has to you have to make sure that you can get in and out and perform that action. So in their case, go in and do your banking and be out within a minute, because if you're not, people can't do what they want to do. And so that's really important when you're thinking whether it's building a site. Responsive sites are obviously going to be super important, and if you haven't built your site as responsive, then go back and tell your geeks to go and get it sorted. That's an absolute must for 2014. So Steve, I want to talk to you because we're talking about gaming, we're talking about athletes, and you do a really good job of connecting those two, because we see, one of the things I love about social, especially from the athlete point of view, we talked about the trolling side and some of the dark side. One of the best sides is that fans start feeling closer to athletes because they get to know them, whether it's via the kicks they wear, the clubs they go to, the movies they watch. But one of the big things is the games that they play, because a lot of these athletes actually play the games that they're in. I mean, that's partly maybe athlete ego, that they want to be playing themselves and the coach is not giving them the ball and they want to carry the ball a bit more. But you want to tell us a little bit about how you're connecting fans and athletes with Overdog?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with an anecdote, and it's one that builds off of what Tom was saying. A week before that Ray Rice quote went out, we've worked with Ray for a while, and he was in a New York Times article for us, and his quote was about talking trash with fans, and the reporter asked him if he minds when fans talk trash if they win. And his response was, no, because when I win, I'm going to talk about how bad they are. What we've done is, and I think one of the important things in connecting fans and athletes, we use real names. We don't hide behind avatars. We don't hide behind screen names, gamer tags. We use the athlete's name and the fan's name, and when we introduce them, we do it in a way that they talk like friends. We have a sign in our office that says athletes are people too. And one is to remind us that their habits are just like fan habits. And the second is to remind us that those interactions need to be organic. When we introduce the fan and the athlete, a little bit as Carlos was mentioning, we try to have the interaction via the second screen. Fans and athletes are playing games via the console on their television. They're using the app to chat and to leave videos for each other. We do those in 6-second video chunks, obviously, so we can push them to social media. We do it via chat on the phone because the sports audience can communicate faster via tweet, text message, direct message, etc., than any other format. You can't call anyone that fast. You can't use a console. You can't use a computer. It's the fastest method of interaction. And when we monitor that and we introduce athletes as a person, fans tend to be embrace, and they get past the autograph line barrier really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, and it does humanize the athlete. And I think that's what social has done really well, and some athletes that are doing a great job in showing a bit more of their personality, and they can turn around like their fan base. We've seen that with LeBron and even Kobe as he goes through his injury and now his comeback. To use social has been really advantageous, and then once the fans start connecting, and in this case via gaming, it's really important to them, and it just deepens the ties, deepens that emotional ties. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss that a lot of the teams they're going to do, and I'm sort of going to put it out to all of you, is that the fact that how can sports better use gaming as a platform? We've seen some teams release their own games, their own fantasy sports sort of takes. Boston Celtics had 3-point play, a Facebook app where you selected 3 Celtics each night and you got some scores. So there's a few that are playing in the edges of that space. Do you think that's an opportunity? I'll put it to Tom first. Do you think that's an opportunity for sports teams to engage their fans through fantasy?
Yeah, I do. I mean, fantasy and a wide range of games. I mean, I think sports teams are always looking for more engagement and trying to build that relationship with the fan. That might be primarily trying to get them to come to the stadium and watch games, but also offline, following Twitter, following Facebook, and participating in forums and games. I think the one thing we've got to remember, though, is that the game itself has to be compelling. They're not just going to play it because it's related to a particular team that they like. So, I mean, it's probably a good option for the teams to be looking at partnering with games providers, whether that's kind of short-term fantasy games or prediction games or quizzes or whatever it is. So it's not their area of expertise. So I think if they're thinking about how to execute that, it's about kind of doing partnerships with the games that they think relate to their audience.
It is a bit like that. I mean, it's asking someone to build a hit, the next Angry Birds, is a bit like asking someone to create a viral video.
Right,
like you do
exactly.
need experts to do that, and you need to understand the game theory and make it compelling. You can't just slap a logo on a bad game because you get just as much bad feedback from that. So, Carlos, I wanted to ask Carlos about in-game, because what you do at Quattr is while you're watching the game and while you're watching TV, you're engaging the fans. What's the opportunity there to engage the fans while they're watching the game? Do you think there's opportunities there in the sports space?
Well, I think it's different. Well, there is a lot of opportunities beyond the fact that for TV viewers, it's a way to increase the experience, the watching experience. But it's also a fantastic opportunity for advertisers and sponsors because basically you can tie your brand to any specific moment of the game. So if you look at TV, you can only have your brand out, when there is a commercial tune-up or something like that. With a second screen gaming solution, basically you can get your brand tied to any specific moment. So, for example, we did an operation last year with Domino's Pizza. Every time there were a home run, in a game, you had a Domino's Pizza trophy, flying across your second screen on your phone, And if you were the first one to catch this trophy live when the home run happened, you got a free pizza. So, and Domino's Pizza knew that we never had, the commercial right when the home run happened, but they can engage with the fan and the viewers on the second screen at this specific moment. That is a very powerful moment, a very emotional moment. That's the perfect moment to engage with the fans, and that's exactly what sponsors and advertisers can do with second screen application. Bud Light is doing that also with their application. They have like what they call this, that superstition is a baseline for all their commercials. Every time there is a superstition moment in an NFL game, we've got a Bud Light trophy flying across the screen that allows viewers to collect all these superstition moments. So that's a fantastic way to get the brand involved directly into the fabric of the game.
So I've got a question, especially from the team's point of view. We're trying to get people at the games, and it's one where effectively both Steve and Tom, you're the enemy. People potentially aren't going to games because they want to be able to track their scores and see how their fantasy team's doing. It's like, I can't do that in the stadium. I'm not going to go to the stadium. And the other one is, how do we convert these fans that play these games but then don't watch? Like FIFA, for example, is one of the biggest online games in the world, but there are still fans that won't go to an MLS game or won't go to an A-League game here in Australia, but they say that they play FIFA all the time, but they won't go to a soccer game. So I guess there's two questions. I'll start with you. I'll start with the gaming side of it first with Steve. Like, how do you convert a game? How does sports convert a gamer to a sports fan?
Yeah, respectfully, Sean, I think that's a bit of a short-term view. I think the folks at FIFA will tell you that soccer viewership and the embracing of a soccer culture is way up because of FIFA. The fact that there are American 23-year-olds who know the teams in, the Bundesliga and Serie A, the fact that I know what those words mean has as much to do with FIFA as it does with ESPN. The fact that we will now follow Americans who are playing overseas and we can engage with them, not just via Overdog, but anytime I open up FIFA is actually a great thing. I think the one thing that, from our perspective and how we know this, is the playing of Madden goes down on Sunday afternoons. It goes way up on Sunday nights, but it goes down on Sunday afternoons. Football fans are watching football. And I think the perspective that I'm sure the fantasy guys will say as well is there's the top tier, sort of high-end avid gamers who may not be interested in football, they're interested in Madden. And then there's gamers who are interested in Candy Crush. And the middle 50 million often identify as sports fans first, fantasy second, or sports fans first, gaming second. And for that viewership, the fantasy and the console games genuinely enhance their connection to the brand.
And the thing is, and one of the things that we have done with the A-League down here is we've embraced those fans. So we've been asking the fans, who do they play as FIFA? And it's just a market that is there, and it's a really big opportunity. So, you should be asking your fans, how did your team go in Madden, or who do you play with, or what plays do you play? And again, it's just a bit of that social banter, but again, it ties your team to when they're playing the game, they're loving your team more. So, Tom, I don't want to put you there as the evil empire and keeping people away from going to the game, but it has been a problem. I think it is getting solved. So I work with a lot of the guys via C Conference, who are the CIOs and CTOs, about rolling out infrastructure. We had the guys from Cisco on earlier. So I think the Wi-Fi problem will go away, touch wood. And so fans will be able to go to a game and consume their sports. But what are the other things, I guess, that sports can do to make that fantasy owner and that fantasy nut go to a game?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing to say, echoes what Steve was saying, is that playing some kind of fantasy game does increase your engagement with the sport overall. So the stats show that something like 2 to 3 times more sports is consumed by people who play fantasy versus people who don't. And the reason for that is not just that they were bigger sports fans to begin with, but actually because if you're playing fantasy, you picked up a kind of a budget running back or wide receiver late in the draft, and you care about his game. That might be the Raiders versus the Bengals that you never would have watched otherwise, but now you're watching it because you've got some skin in the game there because one of the players is on your team. So it definitely drives consumption. In terms of how you get to them to the actual stadium, I think as fantasy experiences become better on mobile, and people can use that as a window onto how they're performing in the league as they do now, and the connectivity gets better, then there'll be less reason to stay at home and track your stats across all the different games on TV or better connectivity. And also what you see when you go to games is that recently there's been a trend of in-stadium displays showing fantasy statistics. So you'll see, the biggest yard gains when you're actually at the matches, as opposed to having to check that on your phone or call someone to find out how you're doing. So I think by providing a route to those statistics, whether it's displaying them or getting better connectivity, that's the way to go.
You were just talking then about in stadium. One of the guys I actually spoke to, the guys from Applause, and they actually do gaming on the stadium scoreboards. So rather than those old play the pre-roll video that makes it sound like the crowd is going louder, this actually tracks how loud the crowd is, and the animation or the car race will change depending on what the crowd's doing on either side of the stadium. So it's sort of bringing the whole gaming space to the stadium experience. They recently installed it at Madison Square Garden and Citi Field in New York, coming out of Finland. But it's a really, it just shows you that, gaming is now part of our culture. So I guess one thing I do want to do to sort of wrap up, you guys are all in the gaming space in all different areas. What excites you about the sports gaming space, and what do you think coming at us over the next 12 to 18 months? We've just seen with CES and Google Glass is going to be on its way. Wearables are going to be something that's coming along. Will people be watching it using the Oculus Rift headset and those kind of things? What excites you guys about gaming? I'll start with you, Tom.
I think all of these platforms provide amazing opportunities. I mean, one of the things that we have as a mantra internally at FanDuel is, we want to make our users the athletes themselves. So any way that you can allow them to play a game, but also kind of give them fame and statistics about themselves to say, this was a personal best record, or you are beating your friends this season 19-7. The more you can make public those kind of athlete statistics, as if the players are the athletes, the better. And also, along with that, is kind of reduce the commitment that it takes to be part of that discussion or that game. So the trend we see in fantasy is for shorter form games, and I think that's going to continue. So we want to combine those two trends and say, okay, let's make these players the athletes, but have a kind of lower commitment bar to participating in that. So any technologies or platforms that can enable that, we see as one step back.
And what about yourself, Steve? What do you see? What excites you about the gaming space?
I think not only is gaming obviously becoming much more mainstream, I'm very excited about how the sports world has chosen to integrate itself within gaming. I think the example we use, and obviously this is a biased plug, but the console world, with what Microsoft and Sony are doing with their next generation consoles and trying to take over the living room, their decision was, let's start with sports. Sports remains the only, live viewing. It remains the most personal attachment to your teams, whether it's through your fantasy players or the teams you grew up with. It creates an opportunity to build communities worldwide. We have 4 different accents on this podcast talking about, the same sports. And we think that opportunity and that technology embracing sports as sports and gaming as the true connector across the world provides us, it provides Quarter, it provides Tom and FanDuel a really good opportunity.
And Carlos, what about yourself? What excites you about the world of sports gaming?
Well, it's about making sports more fun. That's everything that brings fun. I think that game is really about fun. At every game you're building, the first thing you need to make sure is that you're bringing fun, to your users. So what is very exciting here is that it's really about making the game you're watching on TV, turning this game into your game. Your game with your friend. It has to be a social game, and I think that's something very interesting. The other thing very interesting, I think, is I think that gaming can radically change the way advertisers interact also with the fans. And I think that a 30 seconds commercial is a dying proposition. Nobody's watching a commercial anymore. Nobody cares about this kind of thing. You need to find new ways to interact and connect with the viewers and the fans. And I think that gaming is a fantastic opportunity for advertisers to make also their connection with the fans maybe more fun too. And that's really what excites me. If the gaming can change radically, the way people can advertise, and if that can make less ads, on TV and more engagement on mobile, that would be fantastic because everybody hates ads.
Exactly. So thank you very much for joining me on this Google Hangout. If it appears that I am melting, I am. It is nearly 8 o'clock in the morning here in Australia, and it's already 31 degrees. So if you're watching the Australian Open and seeing tennis players fall over from heat exhaustion, that's what we're going through right now. I think it's 90 if I want to convert it for the Americans. So thank you very much for joining us on the SportsConf Google Hangout. It has truly been an international experience. Please connect with all the people that I've had on both panels. I want to firstly thank Tom Griffiths from FanDuel. You can check them out at fanduel.com. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks to Steve Berman from The Real Overdog. You can go to theoverdog.com to check them out.
Thanks, Sean. This was great. Thank you.
And thank you very much to Carlos Diaz from Quarta. You can go to quarta.com to check them out as well. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
And I'll extend the same invitation I did to the previous blokes that I had on the panel. I'd love to have you on the Sports Geek podcast sometime. Take this conversation a little bit further. The gaming space is obviously going to continue to grow. One thing I would add as a real opportunity for the people who are running sports teams out there is don't underestimate the amount of traffic that your player profile and player stats pages will be getting in the lead up to the season. I'm sure Tom will be nodding in the background. The fans will be absolutely pummeling the player profile and getting the stats. So it's a real big opportunity. You can put remarketing there and keep track of the fans. And you can also put specific offers around those players, but know that those fans are going to go there, and even fans from opposition teams. So we see across the board with all of our teams, especially in the 2 to 3 months or the lead up to a season, those player profile and stats pages will get absolutely pummeled. So that's it for this hangout. Stay tuned. There's more coming up from the SportsConf. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. Please send me a tweet if you've been watching it, either to Sports Geek or at Sean Callanan. And if you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/SGP, there's now 32 episodes of the Sports Geek podcast where I've chatted with some of the people that I discussed here today, the guys at Applause, the recent one is with Kenny Lauer, talking about the Warriors Live Google Hangout. But thank you very much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Steve and Anthony from #Sports. If you haven't signed up for their sports email newsletter and get the links daily, I suggest you do. We're not really going to be doing a daily email, as it's only going to be a weekly email, but if you want to stay completely on top of everything sports and digital, it's an email that I highly recommend. This is a special bonus episode. I've actually got a podcast planned, but I thought the content from this hangout was good enough to share with you guys in podcast format. So one of my goals this year is to keep delivering the podcast on the same day. So it's going to be launched on Fridays. As I get my schedule in order, it will be at the same time Friday. Just give us a little bit of time to ease into 2014, but I've got a really good episode coming up this Friday Australian time. So looking forward to that one. That ticking in the background reminds me to dedicate this episode, episode 33. You can find all the show notes and links to all the speakers who are on the panel at sportsgeekhq.com/33. And really, 33, who could I not dedicate this to other than the one and only Larry Legend? Larry Bird is who I've dedicated this episode to. I'm going to wrap this up. One quick reminder, next Tuesday at Honey Bar, we are hosting a sports business night. You'll see it trending on Twitter for those of you who aren't in Melbourne. #SB Night. You can grab your tickets at sportsgeekhq.com/SB Night. Thanks again to Interplay Media for coming on board and sponsoring the event and allowing us to buy everybody a free drink upon entry, or everybody a drink upon entry, and you also get a Sports Geek stubby holder, which we definitely need in this absolute heat wave that we are currently undergoing in Melbourne as I said on the Hangout, it was over 30 degrees at 7:30 in the morning, and that is ridiculous. So that's it for this special episode, as I said, of the Hashtag Sports episode of Sports Geek Podcast. Please share it on your networks and tell more people about the podcast. I'd very much appreciate it. You can send them to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. I've also updated all episodes are now available on SoundCloud. If you go to look for Sports Geek on SoundCloud or sportsgeekhq.com/SoundCloud, as you would think. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for joining me on the Google Hangout and for all the tweets that we got during the conference. I'll also link to the rest of the videos. There's some terrific content. Richard Ayres hosted one earlier with Brian Sarabian. Harrison Barnes wrapped up the day from the Golden State Warriors talking about sports and social. I really love the Red Bull athletes talking about how they used social. So I haven't gone back and looked at it all yet, but I plan to. But I'll have links in the show notes for this episode. Take your time over the next week or two and watch them. It's definitely worth doing. Anyway, that's it from me. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you've been listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.
Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Want to maximize returns from your digital team? Contact Sports Geek about content and commercialization workshop. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.